everyone, as we go live this evening.
Oh, please stop doing that.
It's fun. So now I see your ulterior motive for wanting to go see your name. Didn't matter if we were vlogging or not, you were going to vlog anyway.
Yeah, I was going to vlog.
You could have just told me, man. You could have just told me. Instead, you actually defied physics and odds by being the first person to actually take me to a rom-com. Technically, that should have been your sister, but no, you had to be the guy to take me to a rom-com.
I didn't really know this was going to be a romantic comedy.
And yet it was.
Yeah, it was, but it was good.
There were moments it dragged a little bit.
Oh, I don't like that.
There were moments that it dragged a little bit, so I'm not saying it's bad. But like most rom-coms, it drags. At least for me. But I'm not saying that it wasn't. I'm not saying that it was horrible. It had a lot of great moments. It really did. If for no other reason, I loved when they woke up in the opposites' bodies.
Those are the best parts.
Especially like that last time. That last time when Taki woke up in Mitsuha's body and he's grabbing her boobs and he's like joyously crying.
Yes.
And creeping out the sister. That was great. You couldn't write that better. In
just amazing.
I would dare say that like current day rom-coms could never write that as splendidly as it was written.
It was the best.
Without making it just creepy. And hello, all things geek 77. Welcome as we discuss, with my pop filter showing its age. Welcome as we discuss the scouter on Romney's face. We're not discussing Ghost of the Shell anymore. Apparently, Romney is a Saiyan. He didn't tell us.
Yeah, just been biding my time so I can eradicate the planet and sell it. I mean, especially after the whole planet housing crisis kind of happened way back when. I mean, it made investing in planets much easier.
Well, and then there was the space real estate bubble.
Yeah. Well, that's what happens when you have a long-standing monopoly on planet real estate, and then it gets destroyed by a dirty monkey.
Well, we thought we had it bad when it was Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and now we have.
Yeah. The cool thing is this actually does sound effects. Like
I've seen the Scouters. Yeah, I've wanted to own one, but
yeah, they have these at the GameStop, and so that's how I got it. And it's even cool. It even has like the sound effects.
Again, I've wanted to own one, but it's just like where would it get put? I have no place for props, but I would totally use it.
Yeah. I mainly bought it on a whim. May use it in a future video. Not sure which one, though.
Let's see. I like Ghost in the Shell. Has been 20 years since I've seen the anime, so that might influence me. Well, you're not the only one that did that. Alex walked in blind. Well, technically, he had seen it, but it had been a long time.
Yeah. It's been a good 10 or 15 years.
Yep. I actually watched just because I wanted to. I knew that Ghost of the Shell is one of those things where you need to get your head in the frame and back into terminology and everything like that. So I watched Ghost of the Shell again, actually technically to completion, because I think I'd said it numerous times. I'd watched the thing like 3/4, but like certain scenes were lost. Now I actually can say I've seen all of the movie. But it doesn't matter because all the stuff that I saw or that I didn't see didn't really add up to much. So there you go. And on top of that, I watched a little bit of Standalone Complex. which is miraculous to me because after a certain episode, I can't watch that show. It's too much for me at that point. I don't know if Romney knows that one. It's called Jungle Cruise.
I haven't really looked at anything Ghost in the Shell. I kind of wanted to be completely blind and unaware of the source material going into the film, so I kind of avoided anything and everything.
And technically, we are going to have a fourth panelist tonight, but he is actually off seeing the movie that we are reviewing next week. And the reason he's seeing it in the middle of the podcast is because it's limited release. So there you go. It's the only time that would have worked because unlike most of us, well, Romney has a 9-to-5 job, but it's more earlier than Aldo's. Aldo's is a 9-to-5. So at that point, he needs to go see it.
That, and it's also a location thing as well, because at least based on my knowledge, Aldo works I think he pretty much works downtown, whereas I used to work downtown, but now I work a little closer to home. But it also means I'm no longer near any movie theaters, so options are still kind of limited.
Yep. Were you able to get to Your Name?
I'm probably going to try seeing it tomorrow because I know they're playing it up at Century over on 33rd. Because I know they're playing it there. They're also playing it at the Broadway. That it's just kind of tricky because we're also doing a birthday dinner for both my mom and my dad since their birthdays are on the same week.
It's playing tomorrow?
Yeah.
Oh, crap. I gave Brinton the wrong information.
Well, yeah, because I know Funimation, it's kind of been sketchy, but from the movie times I found, I know that it's playing tomorrow at the Broadway, and I know it's playing at Century and a couple of others.
Yeah, I'll message Brinton and let him know because he was asking. Because I was trying to figure out who I had for Your Name. And I asked him, and he was like, it's something I definitely want to see. And just, I don't have time. So maybe I'll get back to him on that.
Yeah, from the looks of it, it looks like instead of just doing like a limited night thing, it just looks like they're limiting it to basically this week.
Okay, cool. Then I will let him know. Because that makes me feel like an idiot. So I'll let people get all situated and things retweeted and all that. Make sure to retweet, people, so that your respective peoples know that this is happening. That we're talking Ghost in the Shell. After how many years have we actually been reporting it?
I'd say at least like 3 or 4. Because we've been covering this thing since it was first announced. I remember that.
Yeah, we were at Radio SLCC at the time. So yeah, that would be about 3 or 4 years.
Yep, I sadly remember because that was back when I was still friends with a lot of people from high school on Facebook.
Well, I think we were covering it when it was more conceptual than anything else because Scarlet hadn't been cast yet.
Yeah, we just knew that DreamWorks was moving forward on it because it had been in development hell because initially Spielberg wanted to do an adaptation, but then got stuck in development hell, kept getting passed around. The big thing was budget and lack of technology. It's the same reason why the perpetually in development hell Cowboy Bebop live-action movie that Keanu Reeves wants to make is
especially
also
since I can remember like when we were originally covering it, it was a Touchstone thing. Then it became a DreamWorks thing. Then Scarlet got cast, and then and then we got Rupert. I think Rupert came after Scarlet.
Yeah.
So because I remember when Rupert was a thing, we almost lost Romney that day. His brain almost exploded.
Yeah, that's why you got to be careful what expansion modules you add to the Kristen Stewart blank stare simulator.
A thought just came to me. That's why Romney's War happened. Because that entire year, we had nothing but stories that were making Aldo's brain too, but Romney's brain explode. And so his counteraction to us was to constantly bring up the Sony and I can't even remember the name of the movie anymore. But
The Interview.
The Interview.
That was his retaliation to us, as he kept on bringing up interview footage and Korea versus US. Yeah, there you go. That's how Romney's War came to be, people.
Well, yeah, that and the fact that it was just a surreal thing. And here's the logic I had when bringing the stories. I'm thinking, okay, we're seeing this really surreal development of the possibility of World War III being caused by James Franco and Seth Rogen.
Yes.
like not just a movie, but by specifically those two making a movie. And I'm just thinking, we gotta get this some sort of recorded done because this leads to World 3.
And here I thought my money was well spent when I said Trey Parker and Matt Stone was going to do it, but that's me.
Yeah, the sad part is it may not be over just given current events and how terrifying things are becoming.
I hope Netflix does not screw up Death Note. Oh, all things Geek. You are so optimistic compared to me.
Well, honestly, looking at the Death Note trailer, some people get on my case that I avoid trailers until I see them in the theater. I think with Netflix movies, I can kind of make an exception because they're never going to release a Netflix movie into a theater, so that's not really breaking my rule. But looking at the trailer, it doesn't look that bad, all things considered.
I haven't seen the trailer yet, but
yeah, it's just the very vague, here's the vague concept here, the vague characters. It's very much your typical trailer that tries to get the gist of the premise out, and doesn't look too bad. I even saw some of the trailer breakdowns for it. And honestly...
Clarify this for me, Romney, because before we get this started, I looked all around and I could not confirm it. This is the first anime adaptation that has been done by major film companies in the US, right? Because I mean, we have all of the developer hell ones, and we're going to cover them a little bit. But I think Ghost of the Shell is the only one that has actually made it to full on development, production, and release.
Well, that really depends on what you would consider anime inspired, because by that same token, so did Dragon Ball Evolution. Because Dragon Ball Evolution...
I didn't think about that. Yeah, we have Evolution and we have Speed Racer.
Yeah, not to mention...
Okay, so this is 3.
Yeah, and so there have been quite a few anime-inspired films long before Ghost in the Shell. It's kind of the same thing that people were hoping would happen with Assassin's Creed, that people were hoping that this one's going to be the good one. This one's not going to suck. It's kind of, I mean, if you want to kind of get an idea, just look at the average Sonic fan, where they see the trailers and it's just like, this one's going to be good. This one's not going to suck. And then it comes out.
And speaking of, Alex, your thoughts on Sonic Forces, because people have been asking.
There's nothing there for me to comment on. It's a vague trailer still, so I need to start seeing some more.
And hello, Rising Sun.
All I've seen is, as far as Sonic Forces go, all I've seen is the same teaser trailer that we've got, where it's just the pre-rendered footage and people's blurry camcorder footage of a big projection screen. That's about it.
Yeah.
So I need to actually see a proper breakdown trailer before I can make any judgment calls. So Sonic Mania looks okay. If it's just, I hope again it'll just be a little more than a simple retro throwback, because again we had that with Sonic 4 and it was kind of dull.
Everything that I've read is that, at least from the cons that it's made its way to, so like the Comic Cons that it's made an appearance at, it is a nice throwback, but it does do some unique things. The problem is that nobody is consistent. They've introduced different things at different cons, trying to get people's opinion. So, I don't know what to think about that. All right, well, let's go ahead and get things started. We're going to have some fun tonight talking about some ghosts in some shells. So let me know when you guys are ready.
Speed.
Alex?
Okay, I'm good. All
right. 3, 2, 1. And let me make sure I've got everything non-essential off. Now, I just want to make sure that people can hear me, because I'm being, again, especially quiet tonight. Baby girl has been especially cranky today. She actually went to bed at 6:30. So, yeah. Don't want to wake her up. So if I seem a little quiet, you guys are going to need to let me know. I need to turn up the mic. All right. Welcome, everybody, to... Let's try that again, shall we? That's going to be great. Welcome,
There's no
everybody.
do-overs when you're live, Drac.
There's plenty of do-overs, because I dictate the terms. Capiche? All right. Welcome, everybody, to yet another episode of Geek News, Reviews, and Opinions, the podcast where we talk the week's events in Geek. And this week for Friday, April 7th, 2017, I am your host, Adam Mickelson, aka Drac. I hope everybody's had an awesome week because, once again, unfortunately, this week is not where we cover the week's events, but rather we have yet another movie that's been up on the chopping block for a couple of years now on the podcast. And we have seen it. We have delved into its universe, and now we have come back to you to see whether or not it was worth all of the trouble. And of course, I'm being joined by my usual panel of fellow geeks, fellow YouTubers, fellow critics, and fellow awesome guys. Let's go ahead and start things off with Alex the Shadow Blazer. How you doing tonight, Alex?
Well, I'm a little tired, actually, but it all in all been pretty good because today you and I finally got to go see Your Name. I've been patiently awaiting that for many, many months, just endlessly hearing the stream of news. I could say it was great. I put up a vlog about it, and yes, we're going to talk about that next week on next week's show.
Well, thanks for spoiling it, buddy. No, I'm kidding.
We already spoiled it.
we already did spoil it last week. Yeah, so tonight we are not talking about Your Name. We're gonna keep that for next week. And of course, we are also being joined by Stephen Romney of Studio Ghost Utah, of From the Shelf, of Romney's Reviews. Romney, how you doing tonight, man?
I'm doing pretty good. Kind of like Alex, I'm also a bit tired, but that's just more from working, but also trying to take a break from things like video games and getting through the mountain of books that is growing on the table that is off camera.
I was going to say, when you joined the podcast, you looked like you were joining the cyberization movement. So that was a thing too.
Yeah, that, and I've also been trying to dabble my hand at working on some writing, both on stuff I've been working on for couple years now, as well as trying my hand at writing a comedy sketch for another YouTuber.
Yay! All right, and then yes, of course, I've had an interesting week, but let's go ahead and get into the brass tacks. Now, we are going to be joined by a fourth panelist tonight. Aldo Gomez will be able to make it here, I think, for the next hour, but since Alex actually mentioned Your Name, that's actually what he's off doing right now, because he actually wants to be part of the Your Name review as well, and it's kind of a limited release. I thought it was just for today, but Romney just informed us it's going to be for the week. So now I feel kind of bad because Aldo's like rushing this job. But yeah, there you go. So Aldo will be joining us in about an hour, but he is off seeing Your Name as of right now. So let's go ahead and get into the meat and the meaty greedy, whatever you want to say. Tonight is a movie we've been talking about for about 3 to 4 years. We have followed this ever since it was rumor, ever since it was conception, ever since it was conjecture. And we are, of course, talking about Ghost in the Shell, the third live-action major production anime adaptation to grace our shores. The first being, I think it was Evolution was first, right? And then Speed Racer?
Actually, Speed Racer was first and then Evolution. Because I remember I was still in high school when both those films came out. So yeah, it was Speed Racer first.
Yeah, so Speed Racer from the Wachowski brothers, and I don't
Wachowski, they're
sisters.
The Wachowski, all right, the Wachowski sisters.
I think they just go by the Wachowskis now. It just makes it so much easier.
You know what? I should have just gone with that. And then also, I can't remember who did Evolution. Was there a major name behind it?
Let me look. I actually have the DVD, so I can actually pull out the credits.
What I'm trying to point out to people is we have Speed Racer and we have Dragon Ball Evolution.
Yep. James Wong is the director.
James Wong. Speed Racer is, I would say, 30-70. Because there are people who actually do like Speed Racer. It isn't just it is the majority. But there is a silent minority that does actually say, yeah, we love this game. We love this movie, but nobody really understands why. Dragon Ball Evolution, not so much.
Well, yeah,
people didn't like that one.
Yeah, and that one just comes down to two key things here, which I think will come into play in the discussion. Because with Speed Racer, it was coming from a place of passion. The Wachowskis were fans of the original, specifically the American broadcast of the original anime, and so that one was more a labor of love on part of the Wachowskis. Whereas Dragon Ball Evolution was basically Fox saying, "How can we produce this adaptation while it's still relevant without running our own budget into the ground?" Thus, all the development hell, people dropping in and out. It first went to Stephen Chow, but Stephen Chow probably saw what was going to happen. He's just like, yeah, I'm backing out. Here's this guy I work with. He can do it.
Yeah. So we already have two adaptations that are to absolutely terrible. And then this came around about 3 to 4 years ago, where we were hearing about, okay, originally it was like when we first covered it, it was Touchstone that was actually going to be doing the production. Then it moved over to DreamWorks, and then we got the Scarlett Johansson announcement, and then we blew up Romney's brain when Rupert Sanders was announced to direct it. So obviously we were not the most optimistic while walking into this film. And now we've seen it, and now we can actually give our final results on the matter. But first, before we get into the actual viewpoint, let's actually give, before people start screaming at us, well, you don't even know Ghost in the Shell. Let's give a little bit of a history. I had seen about 75% of the original Ghost in the Shell. There were just pieces here and there that I'd missed. But before this movie came out, I saw the rest of the movie. And I had seen the standalone complex anime, but not very far in. So I would consider myself a fan of Ghost in the Shell before this movie, but not like the most avid of fans. Like I was not the guy who had Motoko Kusanagi on my shelf kind of thing. Alex, what was your history with Ghost in the Shell before seeing the movie?
I saw the original movie probably about 10 to 15 years ago. It was essentially that time in my life where I saw what anime I could usually through video on demand. It's not like today where we've got Crunchyroll or Netflix or any easy access. It was sort of like I got what I could get and I saw it through there. But it's been such a long time I barely remember the movie at this point.
So you were basically walking in blind. You know that you had seen Ghost in the Shell, but you were walking in blind.
Pretty much at this point, yeah.
And I should also probably point out, I had seen the original movie. I had not seen the sequel movies, so I cannot speak on them. Romney, your history with the Ghost in the Shell franchise.
Well, in terms of actually experiencing it, I still have not seen any of the anime. I haven't read any of the manga. I've kept my exposure to the source material as limited as possible, so that way I could judge this adaptation on its own merits. It's kind of a rule I have with movies that are based on books, movies that are based on TV shows, so on and so forth, so that way I don't get nostalgia blinded. That was the same case, as we mentioned in Why We Geek with the Power Rangers. I avoided watching any tokusatsu-related stuff, so that way I could actually watch Power Rangers on its own merits. And before people ask, I do have a copy of the original anime. I do plan on doing a review analysis of it once this live action version comes to DVD, so that I can actually give a thorough compare and contrast analysis.
Okay, so then up to that point, you walked in blind, is what you're saying.
Yep, that was the intention. I wanted to limit my exposure. I mean, I knew of the source material. I had seen some of the artwork, but I tried avoiding as much of the source material as I could, so that way it wouldn't color my perceptions of this live action film.
Gotcha. So both of these guys walked in blind. I did not, because I did remember one simple thing. With the Ghost in the Shell universe, at least for me, it takes a frame of mind. It takes being able to know what's the terminologies to know what's going on. So I actually did refresh myself before we had seen Ghost in the Shell, just to make sure that I knew the terms, I knew the characters, I knew what I was walking into. And I'm glad I did, because there's actually a lot of stuff there that even was beyond me. And I think it made it a little bit easier to understand it, actually going back and watching the movies, watching the anime a little bit, just to be able to get that understanding. So with that being said, let's just... Okay, guys, I'm going to warn you in advance. This is going to be spoiler heavy. So if you guys are not looking to be spoiled, this is the time to go ahead and leave, and we appreciate you guys for showing up. But what is our verdict on Ghost of the Shell? My verdict, obviously, we've been covering this for a good couple of years, and I'm going to say it was slightly better than I thought it was going to be, but not by a whole lot. And that was me walking in with not a whole lot of expectation on it, especially considering all the stuff that we had read on the matter. I know a lot of people want to bring up the whitewashing debate and things. In fact, we actually have a story where the production crew are blaming its failure based on that. I wasn't necessarily on that. I'm not saying that I didn't. I wasn't against it, or I was thinking it was a bad argument. My problem was, the enemy's kind of a perfect storm, and I just don't know if you can recreate a perfect storm twice. And that's been kind of my problem with Dragon Ball, Speed Racer, even though I did tend to like it a little bit. It's okay. It's one of those things where if it's created once, it makes perfect sense. It's a perfect storm. It works out. When you try to recreate it years later, you're going to lose something in translation. And that was really my issue with Ghost in the Shell. But I will say it did a little bit better than I thought it was. But when your bar is set so low walking in, I don't know if that's even a compliment. Romney, where were you? Obviously, now here's the thing. Romney has actually already posted a review. So you guys can actually see what his thoughts were as he analyzed it. But what is your verdict on Ghost in the Shell?
Well, going in, I wasn't expecting to be blown away, but I was trying to be somewhat optimistic given that Mamoru Oshii came out in defense of the film. I don't know if Shiro himself made a statement, but people who had worked on the original anime film were coming out in defense of it. So I figured, okay, well, if it was enough to entertain the director, and keep in mind, Mamoru Oshii directed the anime, he did not write the original manga. And so I was willing to give it somewhat of a chance because I'm thinking, okay, if Oshii gave it a seal of approval, maybe there's something here. Coming out of it, and this is without any knowledge of the source material, to me, it's just a kind of boring sci-fi movie that pretends to be smarter than it actually is.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought up the whole Oshii campaign thing because that actually did bug me when we started to see trailers and stuff like that. We had quotes from Mamoru Oshii coming out and saying, "Oh yes, all the scenes that I loved are look so much better in live action," and I'd debate that with you, Oshii-san. I really would, but at the same time, it just felt like they were toting him out a little bit too much. As an advertisement to this film instead of just letting the movie stand on its own merits and maybe just get his opinion later.
Another thing, the one thing to consider in terms of him saying, oh, it looks better in live action, when you look at Oshii as a director, and there were a lot of recent interviews when they talked about whether or not he would, because keep in mind, he's now directing live action movies, and people have asked him, oh, are you going to go back into animation? And he's pretty much said, no, I kind of like doing live action. That's kind of where he is at now. So that's probably why he's making those statements. It's because it's one thing to draw an image and put a lot of time and effort into it, but there's also something else you can get when you have an actor performing a role. And they can sometimes bring something to it that you may not get in animation, since with animation, more often than not, it's the thoughts and ideas of only one artist. Well, give or take, depending on what type of production. And so in that case, that's kind of what I walked into. I figured, okay, I'll give it a chance. Oshii seemed to like it. And honestly, given kind of how homogenized Japan is, it's very much a case of, okay, they're probably not as sensitive to some of the controversies as we are here in the States. No. And so I was willing to give it a chance. I'm thinking, okay, maybe this will get me interested in the source material. And it only has by virtue of me wanting to compare, but not by virtue of the story actually engaging me.
Yeah, you want to compare Sanders to Oshii and actually see who did it better. Alex, what is your verdict on Ghost in the Shell? And this is funny because you and me saw it together, and we did debate a little bit after, but I actually didn't kind of get a verdict from you on it.
I think it's kind of a meh film at best. It's okay to decent because I don't have a sentimental attachment to the anime or to the manga or to any of the other installments of the franchise, so I didn't have a whole lot going in. I would have, I think I said this many, many years ago on one of our shows that I probably would have had a bit more confidence in this if Spielberg was still in the producer's chair, like he wanted to be way back in 2008 when they first got the rights. When he kind of stepped away from it, I was sort of like, yeah, I don't see this totally taking off. I didn't see Maleficent, so I didn't have like a particularly strong bias or if any kind of feeling toward Rupert Sanders more than what you guys just kind of informed me
Snow
of.
White and the Huntsman.
Sorry,
he
not Maleficent. You're right. Sorry, Huntsman. You're right. My fault. So Snow White and the Huntsman. So I didn't have a strong feeling towards Rupert Sanders, but I figured, well, he doesn't have a whole lot of work under his belt either, so maybe he's not the better choice for this. So Ultimately, I
definitely
didn't
one of
have a lot of
those.
expectations.
Yeah, this was definitely one of those make or break director kind of things. I mean, Snow White and the Huntsman could have easily just been his, oh, that was a horrible swing at bat. And then this could have been the home run that immediately made us love him. But sadly, that didn't happen. So,
No, not really. I'm not.
um,
I'm
No.
definitely not convinced either. So,
yeah.
Yeah,
maybe
it
there.
just
We'll see, I guess. But I came out. I liked some elements. I didn't like some elements. It's just overall a very mediocre, kind to average film, I think.
Yeah, that's kind of the. I hate to say it, but that's kind of the viewpoint that everybody's looking at it. It's good bordering on, or it's okay bordering on good, and for a lot of cases of, I would actually dare say it kind of suffers from something that the original film suffers for, which is the story in the original anime film isn't the best. And I know that that's going to piss off a lot of people, but I would actually say that the original film story is probably just as vague than this film, but this film goes a little bit further into the vagueness, in my opinion. So at that point, it's not like there was a whole lot to work with. I would dare say Rupert Sanders kind of walked in with a blank slate. He could have done anything he wanted with this, but at the same time, he just I think I can speak for you guys when I say this was more about trying to recreate moments of the movies as well as the anime, more than it was actually about trying to compose a narrative, trying to actually tell a good story out of it.
Yeah, the film had a very corporate feel to it. That's kind of what I would say, where it definitely felt like the kind of film that was less made by one director and more just a movie by committee.
Well, it just feels like when the storyboarding session happened, it was more along the lines of, oh, you remember that awesome scene from the movie? We got to have that. Oh, you remember that other awesome thing from the movie? We got to have that too.
Yeah,
and that's where all the storyboarding went.
Yeah,
they didn't actually say, how do we get from here to here, from here to here?
Except in saying, oh, remember this awesome moment. It's like, oh, remember this moment from the anime? Let's put that into placate fans. Oh, remember this? Put that into placate fans. That kind of is more what it felt like. It's like, oh, well, this was something in the original. This will get the fans on our side. Please like our movie.
Yeah. So, I mean, let's actually go ahead and get into the nitty gritty of this. I mean, we could probably talk about the bad stuff for days, but just so that we could show that we are legitimate critics and we're not just sitting there joining the bandwagon, was there anything good that you walked away from this film, like that you thought had a lot of potential or that you actually did like at the end of the day? And for me, it actually was, even though the story was a little bit more vague than the original anime, at least it tried to tell one. It was weird, but it still kind of worked. I at least like the fact that they tried to ascribe motivations to Scarlett Johansson's character. I will also admit I did like that they kind of did it in a prequel setting where we got to see Bato lose his eyes, and how they actually got put in. So I'll at least give it that. It actually tried to give itself a narrative, but unfortunately was too bogged down with, hey, we got to do this scene. Hey, we got to do that scene. Romney, let's go ahead and go with you. Was there anything good that you could walk away with this film on?
Well, there were a few faint glimpses of good ideas. And this wasn't even really like any major scenes, but just kind of little things they did to build the world. One is kind of in the earlier scene where you have all the people in Section 9 kind of standing around, and the guy showing up, oh yeah, I got this synthetic liver put in, but then the other guy's like saying, hey, I'm all natural, and kind of that debate of enhancing yourself for the sake of making your life better as opposed to staying all natural. I kind of like that. It added a little bit of color to the world. It made it clear that, hey, there's actually a bit of a discussion about it, and I kind of like how it alluded to it to when the major decides to hire the prostitute just so she knows what an actual person feels like. Moments like that, I'm thinking, okay, they're at least trying to touch on some of the themes. And one thing I will say, and I know we've already put the spoiler tag, but this is probably the biggest one, I do kind of like the fact that they kind of acknowledged the whitewashing by turning it into a bit of into a plot point, because I thought that it's in and of itself was clever, not handled as well as it could have been, but at least there I just felt they could have done more with that idea rather than having it just be, oh, we're just doing this just because we have Scarlett Johansson, and turning it into more of an idea of exploring the sense of having your identity literally ripped from you and you're basically put into a different body with a different face you don't even recognize and stuff like that. I felt that they could have done a little bit more with that rather than trying to basically appease everyone. And it's kind of the same problem that with ideas like this, it's a lot more cerebral. And that would work for something like, well, Ghost of the Shell or any good science fiction story. But then you have the problem of the movie kind of trying to dumb itself down and not be too smart. Because those were like the faint glimmers I saw where it was trying to actually comment on something, but it was too afraid to actually, comment on it for fear of alienating the mass audience.
See, and I'm kind of glad that you brought up the whole whitewashing thing, because again, I'm not saying I'm against the argument, because it does seem really dumb that Scarlett Johansson was cast in when you had viable Asian actresses that could have done the job too. But I kind of agree with you in that regard. I don't think that was so much of an issue because of the environment that they tried to paint it into. It was one of those things where I actually believe in this universe. It wasn't about race. It wasn't about orientation or anything like that. It was who is cyber and who isn't. And that's what it all boiled down to. And I actually like that concept because it actually establishes world building and lore to me better than trying to establish, this race must be here, race must be here. I like the fact that the argument wasn't that, it was who has cyber parts and who doesn't. So I think it actually did address things well. Alex, you're at least one good thing out of it. And oh, by the way, I should probably just let people know, apparently I almost killed Aldo on his way home because I'm getting mad texts from him. He's listening to us on the way home. So we'll get those answers when he gets here. But one positive thing, Alex.
Okay. Well, I didn't take a lot from the story personally, but if there's something I really did like in the film, it really is the production design and I guess it's the culmination of all production design arts here. I mean, between the sets, the art direction, as well as the sound and music, I really like the production design. I like the visual aesthetic of the film. It is a bit Blade Runner-esque, I'll give it that, but it is just nice. Yeah, it's just nice for a change to see a movie kind of do something like that, to see, especially one that's trying to take itself so seriously like Ghost in the Shell, when I think most films like this would have put on some kind of tint or some kind of filter to make it all look cyberpunk and decayed and all that nonsense, right? Or yeah. They either would have done either like the deep blue filters or maybe go the Matrix style and put on the green filters and all that. So I really liked the design, and the photography was really good too. I mean, damn, the camera was still for most of the time. Not in a bad way, but it's just like compared to, like, say, Power Rangers, which we saw just a couple weeks ago, where there's a bit of a problem with shaky cam in some action scenes, and, well, even Marvel's guilty of this too with their movies. Yeah. It's nice to be able to watch the action scene without it making me dizzy for a change. So overall, visually, I'd say this is a very pleasing movie, and sound-wise, I think the sound is really, really good. I mean, some really excellent ambiance music building with some sound effects. It's great, I think, on that end.
It's funny that you both have brought up the world itself as being a great way to be able to convey the story here. To me, I don't like, as much as I agree with the whole it's cyber versus not cyber. Actually, one of the things that bugged me, and I told Alex this, was that if you look at Standalone Complex and you look at the anime movie, things are a lot colder and a lot darker than they are in this movie. In fact, one of the things that kind of bugged me a little bit was all of the hologram billboards that were on the buildings throughout the city. Because again, in the universe of Ghost of the Shell, those aren't there. It's very cold. It's very detached in the city of I think it's based in Hong Kong is where all of this is. So at that point, I will say that contrast was a little weird to me. That all over the place we had these ginormous holograms of buy this cyber part. It is compatible with all of Honka's products, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I think hurt the film a little bit.
Yeah. It does remind me of one thing I did kind of notice, and I kind of wish I had mentioned it, but I feel like this film was taking more cues from Akira than it was Ghost in the Shell, like those holographic billboards and a lot of those other action scenes. I was looking at this and I'm just like, hey, it feels more like they were trying to copy Akira than they were Ghost in the Shell.
See, the comparison that I would actually make is the mall scene in Minority Report, where everything looks cold and detached at the beginning of Minority Report, and then you have the mall, where everything is doing a retinal scan of Tom Cruise. That's the contrast that I'm talking about, is that we went from cold, dark, hopeless Hong Kong to, holy crap, we're going to advertise the shit out of you. And that was a little weird to me. So before we get into the negative stuff, let's address the one elephant in the room, because I already know a few listeners have asked, how do we feel about Scarlett Johansson's performance as the Major, aka Motoko Kusanagi? I'm not going to say it was good. I'm not going to say it was bad. It was really somewhere. It's not her best work. I can tell you that much. It's not Scarlett's best work. And maybe that's just because there isn't a whole lot to work with, especially when they tried to give this character an air of mystery. Like everything that happened before wasn't necessarily there. So I'm not saying that she didn't like phone this in by any stretch. She did well. But it's not the best work that I've seen her do in her career. So I'm not going to say that she's the one thing that that drags this film down. Romney, your thoughts on Scarlett Johansson's performance? Because I mean, here's the thing: we actually did a lot of discussion on this, people, and whether or not she should be the Major.
Honestly, I'm kind of indifferent to it. And I think a lot of it just may be the fact that it's hindered by the direction and the writing. And that's something I'll go into later when we get into the negatives. But really, it just feels like with the character of the Major and just the way some of the dialogue was written, it just felt like she wasn't really given all that much to work with. It kind of reminded me of her performance in Lucy, where you can tell they didn't really think of writing a character in the script because they knew they already had Scarlett Johansson. So it's just like, okay, we'll just set the Scarlett Johansson bot to default and call it good. And that's kind of what it felt like in this film. It just felt like, oh, well, we already knew we had Scarlett Johansson, so we didn't really bother creating a character. And so it just felt like it was the kind of performance that she tried, but it just didn't seem like she was given much to work with.
Okay. Alex, how did you feel about Scarlett Johansson's performance here?
It's pretty much like Romney. I'm just kind of indifferent to it. I mean, it's just, she plays pretty much the typical stoic robotic cyborg kind of character, which I don't know how like emotive Makoto is or isn't, and compared to between any of the 10 million versions out there, right? It's just sort of like, ScarJo, I guess she did okay. She just kind of plays it like I guess any other person probably would play a cyborg.
Well, I mean, like the original movie, she was probably on par with that, because I think then again, I think the actress was literally being told, you are mindless automaton kind of thing, or at least when it comes to these investigations. So I guess that's where they could have gone. I would say Standalone Complex's performance by Mary Elizabeth McGlynn, I think is her name. She does a little bit more emoting than the actual movie does, but not by much. She's still very much the calm, cool investigator type. So, I mean, given what Scarlett had, I don't think she did horribly, but there wasn't a whole lot there. So we've done the positives. We've talked about these performances. Let's actually get into the negative. And for my opinion, I think Rising Sun Reviews in our live chat has said it best. This film was trying to appeal to the anime fans, and that's an issue, instead of trying to appeal to Western audiences more. And I would agree. Again, this was more appealing to the niche audience than actually trying to create a cohesive narrative, trying to create a story to build around all these awesome scenes. And thus, the average film goer who has never seen word one about Ghost in the Shell has no motivation to go and see it. I mean, granted, they probably would have gotten the word of mouth from their anime friend, but I can guarantee you, at least in the trailers, there was nothing bringing the average film goer to this movie. It looked weird. It looked detached. It looked anime. And maybe that was probably not the best direction to go, because I love anime fans. I do. I'm an anime fan too. But I think Romney has said it numerous times. Films need to convey to more than just the audience they're catering to. and that's how they actually win the big bucks, as it were. I'll get into more negatives in a little bit. Let's go ahead and start things off with Romney. Let's get into the negatives of Ghost in the Shell. What did it do wrong?
Well, aside from everything I've already mentioned in my review, the biggest problem, I mean, aside from some of the pretty but pointless shots that were meant to evoke the anime, I think it really boils down to kind of a lack of faith in its audience, especially with how there would be lines of dialogue that would just explicitly state character motivations and what they were thinking and feeling instead of actually showing it. I mean, you have the main guy at Hanka's like saying, "Oh, this is not a person. It's a weapon," and stuff like that. It's like,
yeah,
and lines like "the virus has spread." I'm just like, you could just show that. You don't need him. He's basically like the bad kind of villain that's just like, I am stating my motivation in every single scene I'm in. And it's not even in the fun way where he would chew the scenery either. It was just boring, and it was just very much a case of, oh, well, we don't want to be too smart because we want mainstream audiences to understand what's going on. And really, I think that's the biggest problem here, because Ghost in the Shell is a very cerebral concept. It's a very highbrow concept. It kind of is on the same level as Blade Runner, where it's not going to be your typical sci-fi action movie. It's going to require a little bit more thinking to really be engaged by it. And that was the problem with the overall problem with this film, is that it assumes its audience is too stupid to follow the story it's telling, and thus tries to dumb itself down to basically spell everything out for the sake of that mass audience that just wants to watch an action. Excuse me.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Romney, because I just barely had this thought, but I like that you brought up the president of Hanka, or Hanka, however you want to say it. But is it just me, or like the best scenes that he actually had in this movie were with him and Takeshi Kitano, and it's mainly because Kitano was carrying the scene?
Well, to a point. That just leads me to another point. What the hell was Takeshi Kitano even really doing in this film? Because from what it basically just reminded me of when they brought Ken Watanabe into the Gareth Edwards Godzilla. It's a case of, we're bringing this actor in to establish some sort of sense of credibility, but we're not going to really use them for much.
But he's a danger. But he must save the world. Yes. And that's honestly, kind of the issue with. I would actually dare say that's the problem with every Section 9 character, is that they really are just there. They aren't there with motivations or anything like that. I mean, Bato has a motivation early on in the movie, but that goes away as soon as he loses his eyes. So
yeah. And just looking at it, like, especially when you look at some of the minor things like, oh, well, and again, I know this can be easily explained away. Oh, Kitano speaks Japanese, but everyone in Section 9 understands it. I'm just like, yeah, I know. Cyberpunk future with fancy technology.
Mental communication,
yeah, some sort of thing like that. I get it. It's just looking at it. It's just, to me, Kitano, when he's in a scene, he just doesn't look like he's interested in what he's doing. Now, I don't know if that's just how the character was written.
It actually is how the character is written. Aramaki, the character that he plays, is genuinely disinterested in everything. I would actually say, like, he's the stereotypical agency, agency superintendent, agency runner kind of thing, where he just looks like, oh, I'm just here to solve a case kind of thing. So I will say that Kitano-san's performance is spot on, but that's not saying much, because again, there isn't much to the character.
Plus, that goes into the idea of trying to placate the anime fans without really appealing to a Western audience, because there's a lot about how, because, for example, in Japan and a lot of Japanese stories and in Japanese culture, not showing your emotion is seen as a sign of strength. And while that may be appealing to Japanese audiences to show a character like Aramaki being stoic, for a Western audience, for Americans specifically, where we're all about the individual, we're all about expressing oneself and showing our emotions and still being strong, that's something that I think may have hurt the film's ability to appeal to a mass audience. Because, again, to compare it to Blade Runner, with Blade Runner, with all the replicants and all the characters that play, you still see the emotions they're expressing here. And that's a kind of another underlying problem here, is that, and it may get some people wanting to kill me for this, it needed to take a few more risks in trying to appeal to a Western audience if it meant actually making the story that much more engaging. Because honestly, while some people may say, oh, these are all stoic people, I just was bored. I'm just like, I don't really get any motivation here, so why should I care about what I'm watching?
Exactly. And we're also being joined live with Aldo Gomez of Board Offline, who has seen Ghost of the Shell. He actually was running a little late tonight because he was actually seeing the movie that we're reviewing next week. And apparently I almost killed him on the drive home. Shall we get into that, or shall we go into Alex first?
For having the most wrongest opinion I've ever heard. Go do Alex first.
Okay, let's do Alex first. So, what negative caught your eye in this film, Alex?
Again, it has to be the writing and the story overall. I couldn't get into it. I couldn't get engaged. I was kind of just kind of like, what am I watching here? I'm not really getting it, even though which is kind of sad because you're right. Everything is really spelled out for everybody and everything's explained pretty much beat for beat. It's like somebody does something, it's instantly explained. But even then, it's just like, I can't follow it because I'm just hearing words thrown at me on the screen and I'm just not getting into it. So it's just kind of everything feels detached in this. It just feels like nobody's engaged in what they're doing. All the actors seem like they're just kind of there, and all the characters seem like they're just kind of there. So it's just overall not a very interesting film to keep watching through. It just is one of those, everyone's just kind of here.
Yeah. And again, one of my issues that I think just it hurts the film overall is, again, the whole concept of we have to create scene A, scene B, scene C from movies. I actually don't know this one, but I guess they imitated a plot line from Standalone Complex second season. And so at that point, you had that as well. And they were more interested in, let's get to this scene, let's get to this scene, let's get to this scene, and not worry about connecting the dots. But apparently I am wrong in the story. So Aldo, why don't we go ahead and correct me? Am I wrong about the original, or am I wrong about this movie?
Said it's the most. You said it was vague, and you said it was just as vague as this one. No, have you actually watched Ghost in the Shell, Adam?
Yes.
When?
I literally watched it 2 days before I saw the live action movie.
I have a hard time believing that, Adam.
Hey, what's the plot then?
What's the plot that going after the Puppet Master? The Puppet Master is an AI who is.
And I would say that's a subplot because it's pointless. There's literally more time put into the plot of how far do you have to go before you're no longer human and you're 100% cyborg than there was in the Puppet Master plot.
No, that's part of it though, because the whole argument with the Puppet Master is. So there's two plots that are going that converge at the end. The first plot is Makoto Kusanagi's plot of at what point do you lose your humanity? The Puppet Master's counter plot is at what point does a machine become a human? And those two converge at the end, and that's when you get the resulting part at the end.
I guess you can make that leap. I didn't look at it that way.
That's the plot.
I just don't look at it that way. Like I like the whole concept of how far do you have to go before you're no longer considered human? And then I take the Puppet Master concept where he's an AI trying to achieve humanity, and I think of that as its own thing, not necessarily that they're blended together.
That's wrong, though, because... okay, let me calm down here. I believe that's wrong, Adam, because what the movie is essentially doing, it's asking you a question, it's presenting both sides of the argument, it converges both sides of the argument, and then at the end of the film doesn't give you an answer. It lets you figure that out for your own. So the fact that you're separating the two stories, in my opinion, is ignoring a complete side of the argument.
Okay, all right.
Like, sorry, I had to calm down so I could convey that properly.
We're passionate geeks, aren't we?
I'm passionate about a lot of stuff. Ghost in the Shell is one of the things.
So trying to kind of lace into that, how did you feel about the addition? Like, because I would actually dare say this live action movie didn't go into that argument. It went in more into the lines of trying to discern Motoko's past.
So the themes I saw and felt. I'm sorry if I'm like a little distracted. I have to explain this. I just got my fidget cubes in the mail. And I have been waiting. I got the confirmation email, so I have been waiting all day.
Okay.
Anyways, so if I seem like a little distracted, that's why.
All right.
So my problem, and I have to agree with you that like it doesn't really follow that plot, and I think it's for the best that it actually didn't follow through with the whole Puppet Master and that whole philosophical question of what it means to be a human. Because a lot of the plot I felt it asked a lot of questions and didn't explore the arguments per se. So how we just talked about Ghost in the Shell, how it asks you one question and explores both sides of it in its 2-hour runtime, and it converges. The stories finishes, but it still leaves you with a question. It asks you a question. It doesn't give you the answer. That's up to you to figure out as an audience member, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think what this one did, it tried to ask too many questions. So it was asking, the importance of consent once your memories and personality is something that can become available and accessible. It asks a thing about consent, right? Because that's kind of a recurring theme through the movie where she has to give consent. It tries to say I don't even want to say it asks if augmentations are correct, right? If we as people should accept augmentations. Because the movie, at least in my opinion, it felt like it was very blatantly trying to tell you, yeah, these are bad. But it doesn't tell you why they're bad. And it also doesn't explore the positives of it, right?
Just to add into that, because if you look back to the original anime movie, when you look at the cyberized Bato, Ishikawa, and compare them to, say, like Togusa, they literally looked at themselves more as military assets. And I would actually say in the live action movie, it was more of a willingness concept to cyberize. For them, it was more a circumstance of I was in this, explosion or whatever, and therefore I had to get these cyberized parts.
Well,
in this one, they start off with who was it? Oma? Is that who's that supposed
Ishikawa.
to be? No, the guy who got the liver. Was that supposed to be Oma or Ishikawa?
No, that's Ishikawa. That's supposed to be Ishikawa.
So so at that point, I thought that they changed the argument a little bit, and maybe that helped with things, at least for the atmosphere that this movie was trying to convey.
A little bit, except like I said, it doesn't really explore the morality or doesn't really even ask questions. It just says, "Hey, here's a thing. This is bad." What was the other thing it was asking? Also, what's it tries to ask too many philosophical questions. And I think the other one that really tries to ask, does your past define you, and how much does it define you, right? Because you have people that are very attached to their past, you have people that are not. So you have like kind of both sides of the argument, but once again, it's not explored because Motoko's argument, essentially the thing is that no, your past has to define you. It has to.
Yes.
So it asks a lot of questions, doesn't explore any of them to their max, or even follow any of them to like a good logical conclusion, which is something that the original did really well, in that it asked you a question and it just explored that one question for 2 hours.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of its biggest problem, or its biggest fault was in that is just it. I think if it would have just focused on one question and explored it to the fullest, I think it could have been an excellent film.
Okay. So let's get Aldo up to speed really quick. I'm not going to go over every single question that we've actually tried to cover because, guys, he's giving you how much of a fan of the Ghost in the Shell franchise he is. Because you can go into that analysis.
So for people who don't, because I heard you guys give your history on it, so a little bit of my history is I've watched the movie probably about around a dozen times.
The sequel movies at all?
I haven't seen the sequel movies. I've seen the re-edit for the original.
Ghost in the Shell 2.0, I think it's called.
Yeah, it doesn't really add anything. I've read the original manga. I haven't read any of the extensions of the manga because there's more volumes. I have also watched all of the Arise series, and I've seen the first season of Standalone Complex.
Okay, so you haven't seen the second one?
No.
Because I was going to ask you, because apparently people are saying that one of the borrowed scenes from this was apparently from the second season.
It's not from the second season. It's from the second movie.
Okay.
It's mostly the stuff with the geishas. That's a big thing from Ghost in the Shell 2.
Yeah. Well, see, this is where I'm getting confused, because actually people were saying like when the whole we must silence all of Section 9 moment that apparently happened in the second gig or the second season of Standalone Complex.
Oh, that sounds.
I don't remember that from first season.
I don't remember that at all from first season. I don't remember anything like it.
No. But I mean, I knew about the geisha bots because I just barely saw an anime abandon about it.
Yeah.
But I had seen all the scenes that they tried to recreate in this film. So I actually want to get into the positives with you, Aldo, because you actually put out your opinions on this earlier in the week, and I'm very interested to see like what were the positives that you walked away with this film on.
So I guess I have to preface this with I went in fully expecting the story to not be anywhere near as good as the original. However, that's the only aspect I put up with a caveat, right? Everything else I kind of went in extremely in the middle, just waiting for it to be good or bad. Honestly, I think the visuals were great. I think the problem that so I think in translating a lot of the original animated scenes, I think it did an excellent job at putting them in live action. I would actually have to. Romney brought this up earlier, but I would actually have to agree with Oshi, and I think these scenes look better in live action. First of all, because we have the technology for it now. Second of all, the animation in the original Ghost in the Shell wasn't anything super amazing. Like, it's good. Don't get me wrong, but it's not Akira. It's not
No.
a Ghibli film. It was just kind of very standard animation. So for it to kind of have a lot of those scenes, the iconic scenes like Makoto's body ripping apart was, I think, really well done in this. I think the portrayal of the spider tank. I think a lot of the camouflage scenes, even the water fight, for me was kind of like, ooh, this is what I've wanted to see. So as far as that aspect goes, I thought it was great. I thought it was a little what's the word I'm looking for here? It was a little surprising to see the world so colorful.
Yeah.
Because the original is very kind of based on Hong Kong. And the manga is very all over the place. Some parts of it are very like colorful. They're in the jungle. There's holograms going all over the place. And then other times it goes to kind of the Hong Kong setting. But I actually appreciated it. I think it was in Romney's review where I really have to agree with his thought on it, which it felt like it was supposed to overwhelm you kind of the same way that those people are in the world are overwhelmed.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just noise. It's just visual noise.
Okay.
Because on the scenes where it mattered, that noise was not there.
All right. Okay.
I mean, because if you want to like go back to the Hong Kong thing, that part with Bateau and the dogs, that to me that part felt very Hong Kong-ish.
No, I would agree with that. It's just when they did the overview shots of Hong Kong, and that's what bugged me.
Except I actually really appreciated those because this could have just been any other gray, dull, post-apocalyptic future
you're
setting,
right on that.
And it made it stand out. For better or worse, it made it stand out.
Well, and now that I think about
it,
maybe it was more to give a sense of familiarity because, again, when people think of Ghost of the Shell, the American equivalent to this would be something like Blade Runner. So at that point, trying to give something a sense of familiarity to what others had seen before to get maybe that extended audience into it. And so this was probably one of the ways they didn't cater to anime fans, and they tried to actually establish world building aside from, let's go ahead and show off the spider tanks. Let's show off, robotic bodies being built kind of thing. Instead, it was more along the lines of, okay, this is something you're more familiar with cyberpunk. I
think one of the problems with Ghost in the Shell is that it's such an iconic film. It has some really good. So back to that comment where I said it kind of looks like a standard anime production quality. Is one thing. So don't get me wrong when I say that, and I also say that the visuals in it are great. Because they have like the whole part where Makoto's body's being built at the beginning of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And for as standard animation as you can have, the actual imagery being shown there is fantastic. But I feel like that was actually a weakness to this movie in that a lot of the stuff that Ghost in the Shell showed us, 15 years ago, has been homaged, has been recreated, has been redone 1,000 times, and in better, different ways. So I think at some point, Sanders and his crew, I feel like I'm talking about Colonel Sanders when I say that. Sanders and his crew, I
Maybe
think
you are.
they pretty much just opted into like we could try to do something to make these scenes like better or different, but that's already been done a million times. Let's just stick to making these as close to the original. And I think, I think part of that also, part of the problem with that is that, like I think you said this, Adam, was that it just kind of felt like a lot of times, not the whole movie, but a lot of times during the movie, it felt like they were just trying to get from scene to scene.
Mm-hmm.
But honestly, this movie would make a kick-ass music video. I'm just saying that.
It really would. It especially if you wanted to try and do the soundtrack. In fact, you know what, MTV, you need a deal on that. We need the soundtrack and scenes from Ghost of the Shell done that way. But when you put this all together, I mean, some scenes make sense, but then other ones are a little weird when put into this context. And so it's funny because you brought up the spider tank scene, and I liked everything about it except the spider tank. I actually like the classic movie design better than what they did here.
It's the same design.
Not really. This one felt flatter than that one.
No, the original spider tank was flat and like tan.
I think the big thing.
Sorry.
Well, I think my theory as to why I didn't really have much of an impression on Adam, and this was a problem I had with that scene, was that you could barely see it because it was so dark. It was literally, you had a nighttime fight scene with a bunch of smoke and debris. It made it kind of hard to follow the action.
Yeah. I honestly thought the spider tank was spot on to what the anime showed. Unless you're thinking of the standalone Tachikomas, which are a different thing.
Not the Tachikomas themselves. The other tank that they actually show in a few episodes looks similar to the one in the movie. I would probably like that one. It's a little bit more green. If you, the best way I know how to explain it, you know, the standalone complex intro where the Tachikomas are fighting that big tank. That's the one that I'm thinking. And I don't know. Maybe I'm just used to that design.
Well, I mean, we could sit here and argue about it for like an hour, but I mean, there's no point. I think we're just had to agree to disagree that I think it was spot on to what the movie showed.
Another question that I actually want to ask the panel really quick, because this is something that Alex noticed I walked into with this movie, and I want to see if anybody else had this issue. Did anybody have any problems with, I want to say like it was sudden contrast where we would have moments that were straightly dark and then all of a sudden, bam, like 7 bajillion colors right in your face kind of thing. No. Like the one I want to give as an example, because I actually got a headache from this watching the movie, was where they're in Kuze's hideout and she's just about to get to Kuze, but instead has to fight with a guy who has like a stun baton that every time it strikes, it lights up.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
so like they were fighting in the dark, and every time it was so strikingly bright.
I actually really like that scene.
It gave me a headache, man.
I'm kind of with that. I mean, that one did give me a headache. And in my mind, I'm just thinking, why such a sharp contrast? And keep in mind, I'm just more thinking of the mindset of, are they trying to give the audience a seizure?
Yeah,
I think they were trying to get you as out of it as Makoto was in that scene.
The other one that I want to bring up, I think it was part of the whole opening to put her in the body, but then when they showed like the brain activating, it went into like seizure mode. Does that sound familiar to people? Where it was like so many bright colors all at once.
Yeah, it was like a kaleidoscope of color all of a sudden, right at that moment. That was the only time I had problems. I didn't have too many problems with the stun baton moments. Yep. It was just that one bit where they had to suddenly start flashing the kaleidoscope of colors, and it's like, wow, give your audience a seizure. Great first impression.
Yeah. So I'm not griping or anything like that, but I'm wondering if anybody else had the issues that I did. When it came to those scenes. And then the final thing that I want to go over to with Aldo before we move into some listener questions that I actually reached out and got answers for, or I'm going to get answers from you guys. Your thoughts on ScarJo as Motoko Kusanagi. Did you have an issue with her at all?
Do you mean like acting wise or like the whitewash?
In her performance?
It was fine. It was Natalie Portman in Star Wars. It was Ewan McGregor in Star Wars. It was as good a job as they were going to deliver.
Natalie Portman in Star Wars. I would think there was probably a couple of wardrobe checks that didn't happen. But
I think the Natalie Portman thing would, and to throw in Keira Knightley as well, that's a better comparison than Ewan McGregor, because at least Ewan McGregor, you got something enjoyable out of it.
Yeah, Ewan McGregor tried. Yeah, I think it's just I think it's as good as a job she was going to give, considering the direction. I mean, we've seen ScarJo give amazing perform. I consider them amazing. We've seen them. In my case, we've heard them from like the movie Her. Like we know she can act. We know she can emote.
Oh yeah, she's got good performances under her belt. I just don't think this was it.
Yeah, I mean, but I don't think it was a bad performance. I don't think it was cringy or anything.
This would be right in the middle.
A standard ScarJo. Just give her a damn Black Widow movie already. Like that's it.
I love the fact that we looped around to this because I know we brought this up a couple of times, but it's funny because me and Alex were talking about this. Is like, after Ghost of the Shell, is she actually going to get a Black Widow movie after this? Because this is technically like the movie where she has to carry it, and so Marvel might look at it and go, "She can't carry it." But honestly, I'm kind of there with you. I wouldn't mind a Black Widow movie. I just don't know how you could do it.
Well, it would depend on what type of story you're telling with Black Widow. I mean, there's a story to tell in a solo Black Widow story, but you run the risk of having it feel either like another episode of the Avengers show or having it feel too similar to some of the other movies. I mean, the closest corollary.
Go ahead.
I was sorry. I think I was going to say the same thing you were going to say. I think the closest corollary would be like Winter Soldier.
Yeah. That's what I was going to say, is that Winter Soldier gives you kind of the best indication of what a Black Widow movie may look like, but that leads the question, do you try to tell something that happened in her past? Do you try to tell something that's in the ongoing Marvel Cinematic Universe? Kind of what can you do with it? And honestly, I mean, if I were to if I was given the job of directing the Black Widow movie, I probably would try to go back to the past, maybe make it as an homage to like the 60s Cold War era spy movies to kind of give it at least a unique identity.
Yeah.
But then Kevin Feige would probably step in and make me change it.
Probably. So let's go ahead and get into so listeners reached out, and as soon as we said we were going to be covering the Ghost of the Shell movie, they actually had questions for us, some of which have seen the movie, some of which have not, and so I have a feeling they'll watch this a week later after they've seen it. But the first question that does come up is actually funny because Alex brought up a story in regards to this. And that is the recent PR from Paramount, specifically from the distribution chief, where it's basically their thoughts on why they received poor reviews due to the whitewashing controversy. And here's the thing. We've all said here, kind of, I want to say with consensus, but I don't know, probably not, where we don't think that was the issue here. Like we walked into this maybe thinking it was going to be a problem, but it seemed like they addressed it fairly well. So do we agree with the distribution chief? Is whitewashing really what killed this film?
I think it was definitely a factor, but I don't think it was the only factor.
Yeah, I don't think it was like the knife. I think it was a nail in the coffin.
I think the problem is, and you're going to have this problem regardless of whatever franchise, I think it's the fact that it will always be known as that anime movie.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of fans a lot of the general public will always look at that subtitle and be like, eh.
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing. Like the average film goer doesn't really have a whole lot of motivation to walk into this film. Unless, they're just that big a cyberpunk fan.
Or, they just want to see ScarJo in a skin-tight nude bodysuit. Listen, when I went to go...
So basically...
When I went to go see it, I just want to say this is a real story, I promise. When I went to go see it, I went to the bathroom beforehand, and there were two dudes walking in there. I guess they were friends, and they didn't know they were going to the movie at the same time. Okay. And one of them was like, "Hey man, what are you doing?" He's like, "Oh, just about to go watch a movie." He's like, "Yeah, me too. Which one?" He's like, "That kind of naked Scarlett Johansson movie." And then the guy was like, "Hey, me too." And then they went.
Yeah, And so I guess right there you've just given another argument for the possible existence of a Black Widow movie.
You know what? I'm officially making that the title of this episode. It's not going to be it probably will be Ghost of the Shell, but AKA that kind of naked Scarlett Johansson movie.
Well, saying there is. I'm just saying.
Keep in mind, it's almost like.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Aldo.
Well, that's almost a genre in and of itself because Scarlett Johansson has done similar types of roles in other films, so it's it's almost like part of the subgenre. It's like a subgenre in and of itself.
I'm just want to say, if you want to put up with a French art house movie, she has done full frontal nudity.
Sure.
It's in a weird French art house movie, but if you're really that desperate, it's there for you. But
yeah.
Scarlett Johansson just wants to make an action movie where she's in skin tight bodysuits.
And I would actually dare say, like, that was one of my concerns walking into this was the skin tight jumpsuit, whether or not it was going to be either considered worse than the Black Widow outfit or the Black Widow jumpsuit that she's wearing, or if it was going to be considered better. I would actually dare say it doesn't matter either way, because the skin tight stealth suit tried to go so far out of its way to show that she didn't have, well, parts. And I don't know, it still felt like she kind of did. So there was actually a point, I think I even whispered over to Alex, I'm like, can you see her nip right there? Did they actually go out of their way to try and cover that up?
I think it's funny. It never bothered me once. Yeah. Like, except for one moment where it was the inverse, where every time that she's essentially shirtless, you can see the lines of the bodysuit.
Yeah.
I mean, every once in a while, like, they show you her arm and you don't see any lines, but I'm like, whatever, right? The only time it bothered me is on the boat, and she's taking off the wetsuit, and it's very obviously her not in a bodysuit, but it's like bodysuit lines painted on her back, and I was like, really? Okay.
See, I wouldn't even say they were painted. It looked like they were Sharpied on.
Yeah, and I was just like, really?
I literally looked at one of them like, is that wiggled? I think they made a mistake right there. So the next question that we actually have here is, since I think we've pretty much answered this, I don't think the whitewashing was it. It was a nail in the coffin. It wasn't the knife that went into the heart.
To be fair, I'm the only person that spoke to that answer. So to that question.
Oh, well,
Romney or Alex, if there's something you guys.
Romney and Alex, do you have anything to add on the matter?
I think there's a plethora of reasons this movie didn't do well.
Yeah, that's very much the truth. I mean, because let's face it, bad publicity can damage the prospects for a film. That's undeniable. And granted, there was still a lot of the heavy backlash and controversy with this film from day one. And so that obviously was a factor. And so it very much was a case that washing controversy, you had people getting up in arms around Rupert Sanders, and then you have people getting up in arms about the fact that they were making the movie at all. And so, honestly, I very much like him blaming solely the whitewashing. Kind of just speaks to a case of, oh, this is why we can't have nice things sort of argument, instead of just acknowledging that maybe they just didn't make that good of a movie.
Yeah. Alex, are you kind of there too, or?
Yeah, I mean, come on, this movie opened opposite Beauty and the Beast and a DreamWorks animated movie, and it's a sci-fi movie, but it's pretty rare a sci-fi movie does incredibly well at the box office, period. So this movie kind of was doomed from the start when you really look at it.
Yeah, I mean, maybe if it had come out at, I want to say that the summer would probably have been better, but then it would have been trumped by all the superhero movies.
I mean, literally, if it had come out like 2 weeks later, like.
Yeah, probably.
I think that really is the big thing, because keep in mind, in what it was competing, you had the DreamWorks movie, Beauty and the Beast is still riding strong, and so it's very much, it kind of has the same result as kind of the Ender's Game scenario, where in their bid to try to avoid competing with a larger, more anticipated release, they ended up getting buried by said larger, highly anticipated release.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so the next question that we need to get into, and this one threw me back, because I don't know how they think it was set up this way, but they walked away thinking that this set up for a sequel.
I mean,
I don't know what to tell you guys. The financials don't look good.
I mean, story-wise, it sets up for as much of a sequel as any other Ghost in the Shell property. It just kind of ends.
It ends open-endedly, so like, if we want to do a Ghost in the Shell 2, it would be another case.
To be fair, it doesn't seem like they were planning for a sequel, and as such, it felt like a movie and not episode 1. which is something I'm always grateful for. That was my complaint with Power Rangers. His Power Rangers movie felt like it was episode 1, instead of its own movie. But yeah, I mean, financially, no. I mean, maybe overseas.
I doubt it.
Well, right
honestly,
now the guess is that the overseas will save it, and at least put it closer to the black. But it looks like there will be kind of a net loss or some kind of a loss out of this.
well, yeah, and looking at it in terms of it being set up for a sequel, it kind of set it up insofar that you say that a movie like like an Alex Cross movie sets up a sequel where it's like, yeah, we may make another one with Section 9, but don't expect it. I mean, that's why we've had like 5 different actors all play the character of Jack Ryan throughout the history of film. Whereas the case of, okay, you have this movie based on this book by Tom Clancy that has the character Jack Ryan, but we're not going to make it as part of a large franchise. We're just going to adapt it and then call it good. And that's kind of what this film felt like. It's like, hey, we're just going to adapt it, call it good. If we make another one, great, but we're not going to plan on it.
Exactly. Alex, do you think this set up for a sequel? And if so, would you see it?
Yeah, I mean, no, I wouldn't say it. And just, I mean, I figure whatever. If this movie somehow makes money, it's of course there's going to be a sequel because that's Hollywood, and they'll find a way to kind of like it'll be open just enough, but conclusive just enough, like any kind of other potential franchise-setting movie will be. So it's like any other kind of movie of this genre, where it's like there's essentially there's that hook there to potentially set things up, but if whatever reason this doesn't work, well, then they don't have to worry too much. It's the standard non-ending but open ending, I guess.
Yeah, it's exactly an ending that you would expect from a standalone movie that maybe has the potential to be able to do that. So the next question that we actually have here, and this is kind of a double-edged or a two-pronged question, mainly because they wanted to, or the listener wanted to know, how would we rate Ghost of the Shell compared to other anime releases? So we've already pointed out there was the 2008 Speed Racer, there was Dragon Ball Evolution, there's been numerous other live action adaptations of anime properties. The one that comes to my mind is Gundam has gotten a live action movie.
Edge of Tomorrow is also live action.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but that was based technically on a novel, not an anime. The novel was adapted to a manga, but that's the other thing. And plus, I think we need to make the distinction. Are we meaning live-action adaptation produced by Hollywood or live-action adaptation produced anywhere?
Okay, the question was left very open-ended, but I'm going to go in that regard because it actually does reference to Dragon Ball Evolution. So at that point...
Wait, in what regard?
It actually does mention Dragon Ball Evolution. Like, how would you compare Ghost of the Shell to Dragon Ball Evolution?
No, I mean, are you saying internationally or just Hollywood?
Just Hollywood.
Okay.
So how would we feel compared to the other Hollywood adaptations that anime has received? And let's go ahead and start things off with Alex. Where are you standing on this one?
Well, I didn't bother with Speed Racer or Dragon Ball, so this is really...
You didn't bother with Speed Racer? So
no.
You're breaking my heart, Alex.
Sorry, although it looked ridiculous when I saw the previews. So I'm just like, come on, guys, this is not the anime you pick as a live-action movie. Wachowski's might have had the passion, but it's just whatever. Look, I mean, there's really not a lot to compare to because, you know, we got essentially one property. We got basically 2 properties so ill-suited for live action, and then we got one property that was potentially good for live action. So there's basically no real comparison here. It's kind of a, if anything, I'd almost call Ghost of the Shell a first of its kind, but obviously it's not. So it's just, I can't compare it because we're comparing essentially 2 properties that really didn't have any business being anime in the first place. Sorry, business being live action movies in the first place.
Okay.
All right. Well, chiming in as someone who has seen all 3 of the movies, and to kind of piggyback off of the idea of 2 franchises that shouldn't have been live action, which I would kind of disagree. Because, again, with Speed Racer, you have one that's coming from a place of passion, from genuine adoration of the source material, and Dragon Ball Evolution coming from a place of let's make this cheap as possible while it's still relevant and get in good with the Chinese film market. And Ghost in the Shell is, I kind of put it in it's very much, you have the three different categories right there. You've got Passion Project, Speed Racer, and hopefully Battle Angel Alita when it finally comes out. You've got Dragon Ball Evolution, basically, let's crap this out while this franchise is relevant. And here, it's very much a case of, okay, let's try treatment, but not really do much else. And so, compared to the other two Hollywood-backed anime adaptations, I say it's kind of in between both Speed Racer and Dragon Ball Evolution, because you can tell they at least tried to make it a decent live-action movie, but the passion and the genuine interest just wasn't there.
Okay. Aldo, your thoughts on comparing this to other anime releases. Is it better or worse?
I'm honestly on the same boat as Romney. I think it falls squarely between Speed Racer and Dragon Ball. So much so, like, you know, if I say anything else, I'm just copying Romney here. Like, you could tell Sanders had you know, unlike Shyamalan, at least had seen the thing he was adapting.
Yeah.
Once, maybe, or twice. But it just, I mean, the passion for it wasn't there. There wasn't a love for it. You could tell he knew part of what made it cool, but he didn't really understand what made it interesting. Mm-hmm. Going back again to asking questions, because that's the stuff that Ghost in the Shell does really well, is asking questions, not necessarily philosophical, just in general. And this movie just doesn't really get that.
Yeah, and also compared to the Wachowskis, I think a lot more passion and love was put into that film than I would dare say Dragon Ball Evolution. I feel had a lot of it too. I don't know. I want to say that I'm probably there with you guys. I don't want to, because I like Speed Racer. I don't necessarily have the issues that a lot of people did. It was as hokey as the series was, and so at that point I had no issues with it. Would I say that Ghost of the Shell is better than it? No, not really. I would probably say it's right in the middle as well. And then going into the second prong of this question, which is, if this film doesn't do well, does this kill the potential for other anime properties that are in limbo, such as Akira, Cowboy Bebop? I actually just barely brought this up because IGN actually had had a list of all the major ones that are still in somewhat limbo or being considered. We have Akira, we have Battle Angel Alita, which is being considered also. Bleach apparently has a live action adaptation that is in the works.
Well, yeah. The thing is with Battle Angel Alita, it is happening. It's not even like, it's in concept. We have Robert Rodriguez confirmed directing. James Cameron is producing it, and given how much money he's made off Avatar, he's probably going to finance the thing himself. So we know at the very least that's going to come down the pipe in some way, shape, or form.
So just going off of a wiki article here, movies that are currently TBA or future. Actually, we'll just go with TBA. Akira, Beyblade, Bleach, Naruto. Apparently,
Naruto has one. Yes.
Yep, those are the ones that are TBA.
Yeah, and apparently Alex just IM'd the group. Battle Angel Alita is in post-production, so yeah, it is coming. I guess
it's in post-production, and then we also do have the Netflix Death Note, so that's a thing that's coming too.
Honestly, I think the Netflix Death Note is going to kind of change the dynamic here, because Netflix is kind of a different beast when it comes to showing what kind of movies people want to see. Since one, they don't have to compete with a bunch of other movies with very, very expensive movie tickets, and it's the kind of idea that can be shot on a much smaller budget, unlike say Ghost in the Shell or Dragon Ball or Speed Racer, and so. If anything's going to show that a successful adaptation of an anime or manga property, it's probably going to be the live-action Death Note.
So a couple of other adaptations that we also have in the works. We already brought up Naruto. Marduk Scramble also has one. We also have Space Pirate Cobra, Robotech, Star Blazers. A lot of these are in the works or are being considered. Does this hurt? Does Ghost of the Shell's release hurt their development, their ability to maybe be made? And I think the point is actually a good point has been made. Battle Angel Alita is happening. Okay. So there are some things that are getting off the ground. We can't deny that concept. But to the ones who are probably already in limbo, I don't think this affects them really, because there's a reason that they're in limbo to begin with. And that main reason being, Akira has gone through, I think, who knows how many script treatments. I know that at least one director has signed on for it and then left. Leo DiCaprio says he's on board with the project as soon as it gets off the ground. Cowboy Bebop also has the whole thing of we're either going to get Benedict or we're going to get I don't Keanu Reeves wants to be part of it.
I don't think Benedict was ever actually confirmed. Benedict.
No, he was wanted,
but never actually approached.
Yeah.
I remember it was someone did a fan art mock-up Photoshop image of him as Spike Spiegel, and the fans of Benedict Cumberbatch lost their minds, even though I don't see him doing a good Spike, but that's just me. As for to kind of answer the question, it doesn't really hurt them any more than the other anime adaptations have. I mean, Star Blazers, that's not going to come for a while. I mean, even in Japan, the Yamato franchise is kind of in a state of flux because even the people making Yamato 2199 and all the related stuff don't even know what they're doing with the franchise because of all the drama between Nishizaki and Matsumoto and all the fighting over the said franchise. And as for Robotech, let's face it, what has Harmony Gold been doing for the past while of any note aside from selling real estate?
I'm gonna end the argument here. It ain't happening. They haven't been able to get their crap together. It's not as much as I love it when people say, "Oh no, wait, we've got a script again." I've completely just gone against it. I'm officially saying no. Harmony Gold can't get their crap together. If they did, it would have been years ago. We would have had this already. And that's just not going to happen. But that's why I'm saying I don't think Ghost of the Shell affects this. There's reasons that these things are in limbo to begin with.
Yep. Yeah, because there was even a Voltron live-action movie in the works that's also stuck in development hell for a lot of the same reasons. They can't get a writer. They're trying to cut the budget down. That's the industry.
Exactly.
Honestly, if the poor physical, mental, and physical abuse of the Dragon Ball Z franchise to American cinemas hasn't stopped anything, nothing will. Nothing will. That is one of America's most beloved and favorite franchises. That is anime. And if that adaptation hasn't killed it for Speed Racer or this, or literally any other movie that, quote unquote, takes inspiration from anime,
what should have happened here is that as soon as Dragon Ball Evolution happened, all the anime creators would all collectively have just gone, no,
it's a miracle we didn't do a trading ban with Japan after how bad that was.
But there is one good thing that came out of that movie. The one good thing that came out of Dragon Ball Evolution is that it convinced Toriyama to come out of retirement and start making more Dragon Ball stories.
Fair.
But even then, the YouTube universe would disagree with us because Super's reception isn't very good.
Well, we did not talk about
it. Yeah, but at the same time, keep in mind, if not for Dragon Ball Evolution, we would have never Battle of Gods. Because it was Dragon Ball Evolution that inspired Toriyama to basically come out and say, you know what, let's actually make a good Dragon Ball movie, and thus Battle of Gods.
Yes, and I would agree with that. Alex, do you think this actually kills the chances for these other films like Akira, like Cowboy Bebop, that are in development hell right now? Does this help or hurt it? Does it even affect them?
Hurts it, probably. Yeah, I think it's good. Well, maybe not hurt it any more than they're already hurting because they've been stuck in hell forever. But, it's not helping them either. I said I actually reviewed Cowboy Bebop last week. Yes, I did put a real video up after the April Fool's joke for everybody who's wondering. But
yeah, my daughter won't let me watch that video.
I did say pretty much at the end of that video, I talked very briefly about the live-action Cowboy Bebop that's been planned, and I kind of said we'll have to wait and see how Ghost in the Shell does to see if that gets any steam, and, well, we pretty much can answer that now. I'd say it's going to take a really big, successful anime franchise to probably finally breathe some life into those ones that are just sitting on the shelf for a while. But that's probably not going to come for a little while. But it's kind of like Aldo said. If Dragon Ball couldn't kill it, at this point, nothing will. We'll probably just continue like video game movies, kind of get the occasional trickle and keep hoping and praying that one day we'll get the savior we all deserve. Yeah. And it's the same with video game movies. The Super Mario Brothers movie didn't really kill video game movies, but it didn't help it either.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And then the final question that we actually have is a little bit dated now, because when this question from the listener got to me earlier this week, the speculated budget that Ghost of the Shell had earned back, I believe, was at 1920 million. So there was a lot of stories already saying like they're not going to be able to get back in the black. This thing is going to go into the red for, I think, 60 million plus was what they were saying. But then at that point, we also didn't have the China release or any of that stuff to back that claim up. So the question is more along the lines of, do we think this is actually going to either make a profit or get into the black? And if not, how bad do we think that the margin is going to be for that? And right now it's looking updated numbers are saying speculated, because this is, I think it was 100 to was it 100 million when we looked it up, Alex? It was 100 million for the budget.
Movie's budget supposedly 180 million.
Movie's budget is 180 million. And right now the speculated number is going to be more along the lines of 70 to 80 million after the Chinese release. I don't know. I don't think it'll save it. I think it'll be in the red. I just don't think it's going to be as bad as it possibly could be. I don't know if I would call this movie in the black too much. If it's 180 million, like I think the last time we looked at it, I think we saw it was 110 million. If it was that, then I'd be okay with it. But if it's 180 million, I don't think it's going to save it. What do you think, Aldo? Is this thing going to be majorly in the red, or is it going to be able to at least get itself up to the black?
I think it'll get to the black. I think definitely China, the Japanese markets will hit it. They don't care about the whitewashing nearly as much as we do, because they're just kind of excited to see a Hollywood budget adaptation. So I think China and Romney left. So I think China would probably save it. I think Japan might give it a boost to put it profiting. I think we're focusing too much on the U.S. here, and I think it's important to remember that U.S. is no longer the market as much as China is nowadays.
No, but I don't know. I'm kind of there with you. I think it's going to get either close or to the black, but I don't see profit coming from this film.
I see profit coming from overseas. Not a lot, mind you, but I do see profit.
And then just as kind of an addition,
even with the China, I think this movie's gonna have to do like game busters in China and Japan. I think at best China and Japan are gonna push it to the break-even mark. We'll have to see, because it's opening this weekend over there, overseas in Japan and China. So we'll have to see. But I'm kind of more speculating it'll push it to the break-even mark after those box office numbers roll in.
Okay.
Fair.
Romney, where are you standing financially with this film? Is it going to, after it releases in China and Japan, is it going to make itself into break even, or do we actually see like profit or it being in the red?
I definitely see it in kind of break even territory, because although Chinese moviegoers are still kind of wowed by the spectacle of movies, it's very much a case where it may not be enough to actually like turn Ghost in the Shell into a full-on success. It may do fairly well in Japan, but even then, it's still got a lot of harsh competition with a lot of the local releases. So,
and as an addition, go ahead, Romney.
Yeah, so honestly, we're looking at that. It's gonna end up in the black, but not as high as DreamWorks is hoping.
Yeah, the addition that I actually want to add to this is, it has happened. It doesn't happen that often, but DVD sales can be a thing for movies. They can eventually make their budget back if they were so far into the red. Do we actually see DVD sales being better for this than theatrical?
No,
I don't think so.
Not really, except for maybe if they try to. yeah, unless they're really trying to push like maybe 4K Blu-rays or something to that nature, it's probably not going to get very far because it's just going to blend in with a lot of the other kind of boring sci-fi movies in your average video store.
Yeah, like I could only see this doing well DVD wise if it was bundled with something like, I don't know, the original anime movie or bundling it with Blade Runner, I guess. But I really don't see it selling. It's selling on its own. I think it's going to be an issue. Go ahead.
Unless it tries to like bank on the like hardcore collectors who have to have those special editions with all those extras.
Yeah,
like with Lord of. Even if you were to say have so many behind-the-scenes documentaries for Leprechaun 2, it doesn't change the fact that you have Leprechaun 2.
Exactly. Yeah, that pretty much covers all of the questions that we got. We've given you guys our opinions. You know, this is something we've been covering for 3 to 4 years. It's finally out. Obviously, the best judge on whether or not to tell you that this is the film for you is you. So, I mean, if you want to go see Ghost of the Shell, feel free to do so. But this is the opinion of the four of us on how we walked into this as well as how we walked out. And I think that's going to go ahead and do it for us this evening. So let's go ahead and wrap things up. If people want to get a hold of us to ask us about specific aspects of this film or maybe about other anime adaptations, Stephen Romney, how do they reach you to be able to ask this?
Well, you can always find me here on YouTube at youtube.com/StudioGhostUtah. You can also find me on Facebook at facebook.com/Romney'sReviews. And I'm also on Twitter at RomneyReviews. No apostrophe S because I couldn't get that handle. And as for this week's Romney's recommendation, well, in my bid to try to get caught up on various shows and movies and books that I purchased on impulse, I actually found a television series that surprisingly scratched a bunch of itches all at once. It's kind of one of those things where you're reading a little bit here, playing a little bit there, trying to find something, and this show came along and it basically scratched all my itches all at once, and that is Into the Badlands by AMC. It's basically a post-apocalyptic martial arts series. Basically takes place in a post-apocalyptic world where guns aren't available, and so you have the territory known as the Badlands divided up by 5 barons, and each baron has an army of trained assassins known as Clippers, and they're trained to fight with swords and various other weapons. And not only is the story really interesting, it's well written, the actors are really good, but it also has some of the best martial arts choreography I've seen in quite some time. So that's this week's Romney's recommendation. The season 1's available on DVD, season 2 just barely started. And so, yeah, that's this week's Romney's recommendation is Into the Badlands.
Okay. Aldo Gomez, if people want to get a hold of you to ask your opinions on Ghost of the Shell, on Power Rangers, on our upcoming film next week, how do they get a hold of you to do that?
You can go ahead and find me on youtube.com/boardoffline. You can also find me on boardoffline.com. You can also find me on Twitter at twitter.com/steamboat taco. I forgot what it was. And I just want to say, listen, if you don't want to go watch Ghost in the Shell, that's fine. If you're interested in the franchise, listen, there's a perfectly good DVD that's been around for at least 25 years. You can go to it. It's there. I don't care how bad you think Ghost in the Shell was. This is still intact. You can still go back to your safeties.
I would say if you've never seen a single Ghost of the Shell movie, just go see the animated one.
Yeah.
Just go see that one.
Also, if you really, really want to see how much of a fan you are, Ghost in the Shell comic book, they've also just released it in hardcover deluxe editions. I haven't checked those out yet, but this is the original paperback one. Also a really good read if you're just into cyber and a little bit of philosophy. If you've taken a course, if you've taken Intro to Philosophy, you'll be fine.
All right. Yeah. Alex, how do people get a hold of you if they want to give their opinions or get your opinions on Ghost of the Shell, Power Rangers, the movie that we have upcoming next week? How do they do that?
Well, you can find me here on YouTube. Shadow Blizzard 3000 is my channel where, of course, I post all kinds of anime content and the occasional gaming content on the side. And, of course, if you want to follow me on social networking, well, you can follow me on Twitter at AlexJShort is my handle. And as I mentioned earlier this week, I did actually, just today, in fact, I put up a vlog for the movie Your Name, which we saw today and which we're talking about next week. So check that out. Or if you just want to wait for our show, then wait for our show. Either way, you got something on the channel.
Exactly. And then also, if you guys want to get a hold of me, there are two really good ways to do it. First is my Twitter at Drac2326. You can leave your opinions there. We can talk and we can discuss, and we could figure out if I'm wrong ultimately, or however you want to go about it. And then you can also go to my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Drac2326. It's where Geek News is hosted. It's where all of the other awesome stuff that we do is also put up, including Gaming with the Geeks, which actually currently has 2 series running, one with Brinton and one with Aldo. So if you guys want to have some fun while we play through the Resident Evil universe and discuss some of the weirdest subjects while playing a survival horror game, like college. We got into a college subject. I don't know where that came from, but it's strangely entertaining. So you guys can check that out also. And then also, Alex has already kind of pointed it out, but when we get back next week, we will be doing our last review in this block. And this one was a limited release of an anime film called Your Name. So I have a feeling that our anime reviewers, fans, listeners that are going to be coming out of the woodwork to know what we think about Your Name. So you guys can look forward to that next week. And if you want to go get a hold of the show directly, there are 4 ways to be able to do it. The first 2 are social networking. You can follow us at GeekyNRO on Twitter, and you can search for Geek News, Reviews, and Opinions on Facebook and like it, and you will get up-to-the-minute information for both on when we're going live, the stuff we're going to be talking about, the stuff we might be reviewing, all that fun stuff. And if you want to leave a story for us or leave your opinions on the stories we might be covering, you can email us at geekyweek@gmail.com, and we do get to that stuff. Obviously, we have listener questions today. We have had listener stories in the past. And also, we would please appreciate it if you guys would subscribe to our RSS feed at geekyweek at geekyweek.podomatic.com. That is where all of our episodes are hosted via the podcast. It's also where we clean things up. We make things all nice in official podcast format for you guys. And that's going to go ahead and do it for this episode. Thank you guys so much for continuing to like, comment, subscribe to all of our channels, as well as to the podcast. And of course, for me, for Alex, for Aldo, and for Romney, we'll see you guys next week for more geek news, reviews, and opinions, as well as our coverage of Your Name.